want to give a big welcome to all the Bulldogs who are in the house today. My name is Jesse Hagopian. I've taught at Garfield for the last 10 years, graduated from Garfield as well. I'm now transitioning to a new teaching position along with the Teach the Black Freedom Struggle campaign that I'm organizing for the Zen Education Project. But I'm still helping to coordinate the Garfield High School Ethnic Studies professional learning community with several different educators that are in that group with me. So we shout out to everyone who's in the PLC with me. And we're helping to sponsor this amazing program called CD Culture and Garfield Legacy. And this course is really the brainchild and organized by Aaron Walker Loud, who's with us today, of Big World Breaks. And we've organized these events for the past couple of school years, and they've featured some of the most incredible, some of the most talented Garfield grads who have shared their art and their creativity and their passion and their insights on the world with us, and talked about their experiences at Garfield and how those shaped the art and the activism that they are engaged in. I just want to say a note about why we're sponsoring these programs and how it's connected to ethnic studies, because, you know, ethnic studies is really about centering the experiences of Black and Indigenous and people of color, right? In a school system that all too often invisibilizes those experiences. And it's also about celebrating the great contributions and struggles of BIPOC people, not only focusing on their oppression, right? And so I think the one other aspect I want to highlight to folks about the importance of ethnic studies is about understanding where you are physically located, because that history is often erased for us. And we should begin by understanding that Garfield is on native lands of Duwamish people and Coast Salish people. But also, to understand Garfield, you have to understand that it is in the Central District, in a neighborhood that was historically redlined by banks, meaning they literally drew red lines around the neighborhood and said, we will only loan money to Black people to own houses in this area. So Black people and other people of color could not leave the Central District area, right? And that legacy means a lot for how we live today.
Good morning, everyone. Greetings. Giving thanks to Aaron from Big World Breaks for making it possible for me to be here with you today. I also give thanks to our ancestors. I acknowledge our ancestors. I acknowledge our ancestors. I stand tall because of them. We stand on their shoulders, Ashe. When we say Ashe, it means, shall it be so? So yes, I'm a Garfield alumni. I'm very happy to say that I attended Garfield and graduated during the class of 76. I was born on Capitol Hill in the Seattle area. I was born in the Seattle General Hospital. We don't have it anymore here in Seattle, but there was a Seattle General Hospital. My family was rooted in the central area since the early 1950s. My mother, her name was Alice. She migrated to Seattle just 2 days after she graduated from high school out of Texas. She tagged along with her big sister, my Auntie Marie, and our families were united, and we were all based in the central area. Our neighborhoods were Garfield High School and Madrona Elementary Schools. So when growing up, our families, we went to church, and that was it. You had to go to church, right? And we all had lots of friends within our church communities. It was a lot of fun. It didn't matter back in the day which neighborhood you lived in. It was just important that you attended school, you went to church, and you had that old school upbringing called RESPECT, respect. Right? That was it. And we were all family. We were all very appropriate, and we had fun as kids. We had great experiences. What made me really happy is watching my father. His name was Lewis Lee. He was in the military. Watching him with his Malcolm X medallions on and his goatee, and he would always talk about Black Power and the history of Black people. Um, and my mother, she was a very strong Christian. We had a very strong Christian home, and um, it was a very fun childhood. But what made me happy with all of those really important values within my family was learning about my culture. Learning about my culture. So we were at Madrona Elementary School when we had the artists and culture that would come and they would teach us. And then they would go away. And then it was me that decided, well, I'm going to continue on because I want to practice my culture, right? So we would learn African dance, we would learn rhythms, and then we would bring it to the schools and we would ask the teachers if we could practice after school. Now, this was when I was in elementary school, and that continued on when I moved into middle school at Eckstein Middle School. At Eckstein Middle School, we made sure that the teachers knew that we wanted to practice. You see that photo? That's my Eckstein Middle school ID. That was back in the day, y'all.
Right on.
That was back in the day. And so we would practice African dance, not just at school, after school, but the whole living room at my house was just full of dancers, and we would just be dancing away. And my brother, he would have the basement. So he would have the bands. And so, the guitars, the drums, the horns. So our house was full of music. And then it became full of arts and culture as a young child. It's really inspiring to think back to all the engagement from the community, right? I think I was the youngest person that was going to the community centers with the older people learning African dance, African drum. Now it's called Langston Hughes Arts, the Institute for Arts and Culture. Or maybe it's something like that, the similar name. Erin, you can help me out with that. But back in the day, it was the Jewish synagogue. But they opened the facility for us to go and have rehearsals, and we did. So that was the beginning, and that was like a life-changing experience for me to be able to engage my culture because of artists that came in to the school and opened our eyes to who we are as a people.
For me, as a baby, we lived on Union, and when I probably got to like elementary school age, we moved to the Valley, and I went to Martin Luther King School down in the Valley, and then went to Stevens. And I feel like probably around the time I was in Stevens, which was, I don't know, early 80s, hip hop first came out. And the kids that lived on my street and the older guys on my street were always playing the music loud. And I don't know if this happens anymore. I don't see it anymore. But I had a neighbor that would actually put the speaker out the window facing outside and just blast whatever the new music was at the time. So that's how I even got into hip hop and funk and soul and stuff like that, because it was just around me. And I gravitated towards, it's kind of all I cared about, as a little kid. That's when I would get an allowance, I'd go buy a record at Dirt Cheap Records on 21st and Union, or go to Orpheum and places like this. So it's really I don't know, didn't really know anything else but that. So, going on, to once I got to like 6th, 7th grade, and I'm going to Meany, and hip hop is just dominant at this point. But it, not like it is now. You still had to search it out and find the music. It was just a community amongst people that had the stuff, and it was all about having a tape nobody else had. That was how you could be cool and have something special. And I feel like just that, I carry that with me to this day. I'm trying to find like a sample nobody has. I want to know about hip hop other people don't know about. Like, that's just always been like something just inherent in everything I've aspired to do. I just wanted to be ahead of things in that way. But yeah, I mean, I was a break dancer in those days, the early days. That was also like part of hip hop. I wrote graffiti, everything. And it was all, based around the city and my friends in my neighborhood, because that was just what we were doing. We were playing basketball and we were listening to hip hop,
Thank you for breaking that down. I don't know if there's any alumni here from Meany or Stevens, but you have one now on the call at least. And most of the people I knew came out of like I was at Leshai and MLK and Washington, but it's important to remember that there's all these other feeder schools that come into Garfield. And there's a lot of interesting history that's a little bit more overshadowed when you look at some of the music history that came out of Meany Middle School as well. And you're one of a few of them for sure. Mr. Wadey Irving, a great music educator who doesn't get as much shine or acknowledgement as the nationally award-winning educators, Mr. Nat, Mr. Acox. But the more I've been doing this project, the more I've been meeting people who had a chance to study with Mr. Irving and other people like that. So did you by any chance take any music classes in elementary school or middle school, or was it more so just outside of school that was your experience?
I think I played like trumpet for like a year when I was at Stevens, but it just hurt my mouth. So like, it was just too much work. And at that point, man, honestly, like with hip hop, I just wanted to scratch. Like I wanted to be a DJ and scratch. And that was just so not normal. And there was like one dude in the whole neighborhood that had like turntables, this was like very rare to see that. And I think a lot of the hip hop aesthetic was like anti-musician at this time, so like even friends of mine at Meany, like another Garfield alum, Amos Miller, he was like really playing piano at that time. And I remember like, I just want to make beats. I don't want to play piano. But I remember going into Mr. Irvin's class, they had like 30 Fender Rhodes in there. It was a really cool room, and I would go watch those guys play sometimes. But I actually never took music classes at that time, which I definitely regret. It would have made things easier on me later in my career if I had to learn a lot of that foundational music knowledge, theory stuff later on. But I talked to Vitamin about this a lot. I think sometimes that we come to it from a hip hop perspective. We hear things that don't necessarily make sense on a linear music theory scale that makes it unique and interesting. So I go back and forth on that, if that was like something that was good or bad for like my future development.
Circle Pulse is a consultancy, so I facilitate professional development, and I also go into schools and work directly with students. And I host conflict circles, talking circles, healing circles. What that basically means is I set people in a circle and I pose certain topics to the group, and we talk openly and honestly about these topics. It's interesting given kind of the restraints that are put on conversations now. But when I started doing circles in schools, those restraints were not there. So my very first one was actually at Garfield. It was after a hazing incident. We went to all the classrooms, all the different grade levels, and we spoke openly about the incident and really what the students felt like they needed to get through it. And it was wonderful. It was healing, it was powerful, and the students were given voice, and their teachers were allowed to stay in the classrooms and really just sit there and listen to what they had to say, which was powerful. And at Nova High School, right across the street, I actually did racial equity circles. And for those, we really just talked about race and what people understood about it in the classroom. And so we had much more freedom than I guess we have today to have those conversations. So I value the time that I have with students and with teachers and with administrators. And we all speak openly in this forum. And it is an Indigenous practice. We honor the land that we're on and these practices that have come to us by way of tribes. We use a talking piece or a feather. And the way that it works is we open the circle with this feather and we all share a guideline and to make the safe space for everyone to speak openly. There's no retribution. There's no hierarchy. We're all equals and we all face each other as equals. And I pass the circle around, the feather around the circle, and each person gets a chance to speak uninterrupted. So whoever has the talking piece or the feather is the only one speaking, and the rest of us are just listening. And it's been a powerful practice that we've used in community as well as in schools. So I did this many years after leaving Garfield. And what inspired me was really just the legacy of my family being a Panther Cub. My dad and my uncles went to Garfield and have sealed their names in history as civil rights icons, Black Panther Party of Seattle. And I felt like, for me, learning healing from my mother was really important as well. She was a master Reiki practitioner. She does energy healing. So that's what inspired me also to study healing and to use it for social activism, use it to help the community. And I ended up working with an organization called the Center for Ethical Leadership. And with that organization, we were able to advocate for mediation programs and really a diversion program that the city has picked up where youth under the age of 18 can request a restorative process. And young adults from 18 to 25 can request a restorative process that's pre-filing, which is huge because that basically means if they are deemed appropriate for a circle and they're able to request this process, then they will go through the process and never get a record. They will not have charges filed against them if they do the process. And that's huge for the city. We want this to be something that's available to people all over the country. And so I've just been inspired by all of the influences in my life to fight for social justice, to fight for students' rights, to fight for everyone having a voice. It's important to learn from our youth and see teachers and youth as humans who can speak openly to each other, and that will limit the amount of conflict we see with people not understanding where the other's coming from. Just having those spaces where you can talk openly and honestly to each other is so important. So I hope to bring this practice back to Garfield and to every school in the district so that we can use it as a healing practice for us to just talk about things that affect us. The pandemic just being one of many.
Born and raised in Seattle in the Central. I born at Group Health Hospital, now Kaiser. I used to live at Spruce Park. That was my stomping grounds. And then 23rd and Marion. And I graduated from Garfield in 2006. And just as far as what I do, I make television right now, which as far as my role, I'm a vice president of scripted programming at a company called Macro. And our whole focus is to amplify diverse creatives in front of and behind the camera while helping shape and uplift culture. So some of the movies and TV shows that we've made, Fences, Sorry to Bother You, Judas and the Black Messiah, Raising Dion on Netflix, Hentified, and much more is what I do here. And as far as how did I got to this path, started off with my time in the Central. I I definitely grew up in an environment that not only was really diverse, but super creative. And it kind of planted the seeds for the work that I'm doing now. And a little bit at a time, I was able to get a deeper understanding of sort of my path and purpose of what I wanted to do to eventually lead here. But going back in time, it was I got bit by the acting bug. So in middle school, and I went to Washington, I started doing theater with the Langston Hughes Performing Arts program, and they did the summer musicals. And for me, I was broke. I was trying to figure out work and whatnot, and they had a $200 stipend just as far as the program, and I auditioned and I got into it, and I was like, dope! I get to make some money for the summer. And over there, the program was led by Isaiah and Danae, and I was able to do musicals like The Wiz and Peter Pan, and really fell in love with just sort of the creative process and the singing and the dancing and the musical nature of it all. And when I got to high school, I thought I wanted to be an actor. And I definitely did more theater, not only at Garfield, but in the community, just as far as arts and programs. And I eventually continued to go on that path. But I did have conversations with my family and whatnot. And, I don't know, people say don't kill somebody's dreams, but they definitely hit me with, you want to be an actor, you might be a starving artist, you better get a degree in something substantial. And, for me at that time, I was like, nah, y'all bugging. But it wasn't until just as far as taking the experiences that I had, and after graduating, and I graduated from Garfield in 2006, which was the last class from the old building, also the best class for all the students that's listening right now, just letting y'all know 2006 was.
Don't start it with all that.
I'm going to start it. I'm starting it, 2006. But just as far as my experience after graduating, I deferred my freshman year of college, and I went and I lived in Senegal, West Africa, where my family's from. And I left the regular classroom and entered the classroom of the world. And just seeing the way of life there, the lack of resources, but also, the spirit and the, creativeness and ingenuity of family members, it really had me understand what opportunities that I had back home and what I was given, and really lit a fire underneath my butt to try to make some things happen. So when I came back and I went to school at St. Martin's University out in Lacey near Olympia, I got a degree in business and administration. And from there, I said, all right, I still want to work in the arts. I'm going to try to figure it out just as far as the business side. And I moved down to Los Angeles. I hit my 10-year anniversary on the 12th next week, but slept on my sister's couches out here and went on a crazy path of becoming a development executive now. But that's sort of the cliff notes just as far as how I got into the particular path. And I'll definitely go into more detail just as far as the specific experiences that the conversation goes.
I would like to, first of all, thank all of my teachers, because they were also instrumental in my development, in different ways. But I would say the one that I remember the most and had one of the more emotional impacts and has given me lasting emotional satisfaction has been the tutelage of Mr. Nat, Robert Nat, at Washington Middle School. And what he taught me was discipline, a certain level of precision, dynamics, Black excellence, just universal excellence on top of that. But I would say Mr. Nat was one of the most instrumental people in my development as an artist, as a human being. And before coming to Garfield, that's who really impacted me the most, Robert Nat.
Well, while attending Garfield High School, as I just mentioned, our history teacher, Mr. Joe Narte, He was from Ghana, and he taught us about homeland. He also extended his time into the community. And so we were able to learn more about the dances from Ghana. And it was such a hit. It was like, it was so important to us. We worked with him and made sure that when we took PE, our physical education classes, and when we took history, we actually got credit for that, for learning about our culture. And that was way back in the day, right?
Wow.
And it was amazing. So we knew at that time that our student voices were powerful, and we created fun, we engaged the communities. That went well into graduation. It was so powerful to where all we talked about is like Black Power, Ungawa, Black Power, right? And so this symbol that we say, I love being Black, because it was totally about us celebrating who we are. And it was a learning curve for most of our parents as well, because they didn't have time or the opportunity to learn about our culture as we were diving into it. There were other talented artists that I was able to engage with as a young child and as a teenager, like Dumasani Marere. He was from from South Africa, excuse me. Joe Brazil, he was up at the Academy in the Central area, and then Seattle's very own Ernestine Anderson. There was a local band there called Cold Bolden Together, and they would rehearse every week right down the street from our house. So we were always like learning about music, arts, and celebrating it as a community. It was just so much fun. I remember my play cousin, because our parents were very close. His name was Rodney Liverman. He's still living, and he loved drumming. But the way that I was able to walk from 33rd and Olive all the way down to 17th and Yesler was that my play cousin, he was like my security guard, right? But he would have to walk me there and walk me back. And it was awesome. We loved it. And so those were some of our very important growing facts about how committed I'm going to be. That is the second phase of my life that I've called recruitment, because I wanted all my friends to learn about Africa and learning African dance and music. I was also a part of an initiative. It was an all-school African drum and dance ensemble. What it was a group of people, just like the work that Big Breaks is doing right now, like bringing everyone together. It was a group of other people that brought music students, dance students from all the high schools together every year, and it would provide an all-school concert. And then it was an all-school video, and it was an all-school LP. It was, the big records that you would play with the needle. Yeah, and so our African drumming music was also recorded on there. And so just looking at the different ways that people was very receptive, and how our families saw us, transform in terms of commitment and performance, it was just so exciting to me.
Definitely, like my freshman year when I went to Garfield, it was the first time I saw like other people that were my age, like making real songs. Like it wasn't like they were just, like when I was in Mini, we'd rap over instrumentals or whatever it was, but nobody like had a setup and was making their own original song. So I remember going to a assembly, I don't remember which particular one this was, and Ghetto Children, which is Vitamin D's group, performed. And he's up there scratching, they're playing a beat. My mind was so blown away, because I just didn't think this was like that kind of hip hop was being done in Seattle, because before then we kind of only had Mix-a-Lot and other things that they would play on KCMU, this thing called Local Music Spotlight. But to see that, just like, oh man, I see this dude in the hall and he's carrying a turntable, like that just blew me away. And it just made it real. I think it's like anything, you see something in front of you, it makes you feel like, you can do it. I think it's no different to like basketball in the region. Like once we started seeing guys make the NBA, and you're like, you could touch that person, you're like, oh, I could do this. So like at that point, I got to see Vitamin do that. And, I didn't even know him at that time, but I just was like really inspired by that.
It's interesting. I've thought about this, anticipating the session today. And the most powerful lesson I learned from being a bulldog was the ability to use my voice, to be heard and to not be afraid, to be honest. There were protests that happened when I was a student. I remember the Gulf War and protesting that. And I was able to use my voice and speak about it honestly in class. And there was never any retribution. There was never any censorship. But I also, just something as simple as having people to look up to who are alumni and who I went to school with at the time, and just all of their actions inspiring me to be the best I can be. I studied under Mr. Clarence A. Cox as well. I was in the marching band, and then I moved on to being a cheerleader. So we were always, active in every sport, and the band was always there. And it's just a family atmosphere. And he instilled a lot of, I wouldn't say perfection, but just being the best you can be, showing up every day. He didn't tolerate anyone who wasn't fully engaged. So I learned to be fully engaged and show up every day. And that was important for me at Garfield. And I met a lot of wonderful people who are in many different industries, in art, music, business, tech at Garfield. We have many brilliant people who have come from this great school. And so I think I've just been inspired by the students that I went to school with and my teachers. I mean, I have to shout out Mr. Davis. He was my math teacher, and he was a rock star. There's not a lot of math teachers that, have that status. He had a little show at the time, and it was great. His partner in crime, or in math, as you can say, Mr. Babani, I believe, he used to bicycle past my house every day, on his way to school. And it was wonderful because they were role models I didn't know I needed. I've always been, an honor student in history and in English, and, in math, I did pretty good, and they inspired me to show up every day for math. And that just made me a better student. And at the end of the day, it made me a better businesswoman because I've learned a lot of lessons from them that I can use. So in terms of being a bulldog and what that really meant to me, it just meant that I had the power and the freedom to use my voice and be an activist in any way I chose. And if that just means being an art activist, you can do that. You can use art as your activism. You can use dance as activism. You can use healing as activism. So my healing art is a form of activism. And I choose to be a peaceful warrior, if you say. I use my skills of conflict mediation and mindfulness to help people get through difficult times. And that's a form of activism.
Lots of different experiences. I can start off with the first one, which was heartbreak, right? And I'll go from there. But I didn't get into Garfield my freshman year, even though I lived a few blocks away, and that's where all my friends and family went. Just by the nature of me submitting at that time and number of students and whatnot, I got into Cleveland High School. So I had to go to Cleveland my freshman year, and then I got into Garfield my sophomore year, which I was very excited about and whatnot. But to get the news that, hey, I'll be going way out to Beacon Hills, South Endish to go to school and whatnot, definitely impacted sort of the friendships that I had, in addition to, the experience. When you get into high school from middle school, whatnot, you feel like it's a fresh start. I feel like college, when you get into there, you feel like it's a fresh start. A lot of my childhood friends that I grew up with, who I thought when I get to school with, I'll be able to, fall in place to keep it ripping and running. Had different relationships and friend circles when I got there sophomore year, and freshman year is a pivotal time. So I did feel like I had to play a little bit of catch up, and just being a student who, and I talk about this a lot, but I had definitely free lunches and didn't have a lot of money or whatnot. I spent a lot of time, with my friends, trying to, just find my place in school, but also my identity, and wasn't the most popular kid, but definitely connected and kicked it with the homies where I tried to do things that I felt like, hey, like might as well give it my best shot. Tried to be on the basketball team. Wasn't really the best hooper, but I felt like all of us had hoop dreams in Seattle. That didn't work out. But as far as being involved in certain groups and organizations there, I really academically found my place, and continued to do extracurricular activities just as far as sports in the community, as far as rec leagues and whatnot. So college access now a pivotal program for me, just as far as going into to college. I was part of the first cohort there when they were doing the after school programs, to eventually get to St. Martin's University, where I ended up becoming student body president at my university. But doing the work there with the after school mentors and people there led me to that.
So, Ahmadou, I just wanted to say I really appreciate hearing that, because my mom helped launch that program, College Access Now. So that's good to hear.
Cheers to your mom. She got me in college. There we go. But some other stuff, just as far as programs that were there, I was able to help build a computer lab in Arusha, Tanzania, with Dr. Rai there, and it's one of those opportunities where you're helping learn how to build and furnish computers, and we had to fundraise and get money to eventually go to Kenya for 2 weeks. I think was just unheard of, but just as far as an experience of, that was my first time going to Africa. My family is from there, and I going to a whole different country, but experiencing that place. I always tell folks, especially who I grew up with, but back in the district or just in other places, that there's more to the world than the end of the block. And I do think exposure leads to expansion. And I think that's the one thing a lot of people have to understand and realize, is that I think in high school, I thought, this was it. This was my world. This is all that's out there. And, this is who I'm going to be with, forever. And once you start to see other things and opportunities, you realize, hey, I could do that, or hey, I could do that. And one of the things that planted another seed for me about that is at Garfield, I think there was a wall of alumni. And I don't know if it's still there, but it was, I want to say it was, I don't know, the school's now redone, but it was farther in the back of the building, closer towards Alder. And they had a wall of like notable alumni and whatnot, but Quincy Jones was on that list. And Quincy is probably one of the most prolific, producers of the music industry in general. And he lived near Ezos, his family and whatnot. And, to see him do that and work with Michael Jackson, all these other people, whatnot, just as far as entertainment, I definitely thought that, hey, if that's somebody who came from this same area and did it, then there's a potential for us to do it. And there was definitely, people who were connected to him, but just as far as being connected to Quincy in general, I thought that was a million miles away to do it. But just as far as having that be a North Star of a direction to go in, and also theater, just as far as doing, whether it was Shakespearean plays, which I was like, I had no idea that I would do that at Garfield, or doing that in addition to other things, it opened up my mindset to say that there's other opportunities and things out there. And I think it led to an open-mindedness when it came to different opportunities in my future, especially in this industry of entertainment, where not one path can lead to a certain thing, but being able to be consistent and work with different artists and collaborate and see things out, you're able to make incredible TV shows or films. And this is definitely an industry where not one person can do it alone. So all those different things, experiences and influences kind of led towards my experiences out here in the career path.
Absolutely. I've never really shared this before in an interview or in this type of setting, but I felt like it's important kind of like to give people a perspective of what it was like in the late 90s at Garfield, and at the time, the corner right on Alder, that's where all the musicians kicked it. CDs were very popular, and Kelly Montague, Camilo Estrada, Keith Udelman, the homie Dan, Aaron Walker Loud, all Jamani Smith, Jason Chambliss. These were all our big homies, right? They were a couple classes ahead of us. So they released a recording that really caught a buzz, you know, like they were rocking the Magnolia Community Center or whatever. And we go out to these hip hop nights when the mayor had, Mayor Paul Shell had like a noise ordinance. And we would go to these hip hop nights, which were specially curated for youth, right? So that's where we got down as bands, you know, at the local, what was it? The local 408 downtown?
Are you talking about, yeah, where the Vera Project was way before it was officially down at the Seattle Center, I think?
Yes, those types of venues. We had a noise ordinance, so we weren't allowed to partake in the pleasantries of the nightlife in Seattle. So there was this specially curated scene, which was like a snapshot in time. So the band that really at that time inspired us was a band called The Flood. And Kelly Montague was the lyricist. He was the MC. He was like, to us, he was like one of the coolest cats. You know, we were like, man, Kelly got the backpack, or you know what I'm saying, with the hoodie. And that was very inspiring to us, is kind of like little bros, you know what I'm saying? Seeing our big bros putting music on wax, recording things, documenting, chronicling, because, you know, that's a big part of being an artist, is how do you document? How do you catalog? How do you keep it all into the continuum for other people to share with other people, for other people to discover later on?
Do what's in your heart. Like, I know it sounds generic, but that's all that's ever worked for me. And, you know, just try to create something that's like a little different than what everybody else is doing. Even if you have some of those elements that everybody else is doing, have your own different twist, because it's the only way to like differentiate yourself and stand out at this point. Like, there's really like a million people doing beats, and a lot of people are good, but it's like, it's almost better to be like horribly bad or amazing. You can't just be good. Being good is like that's like the worst place you could be. You want to like be extreme either way.
Like Aaron said, I was able to express myself. And there's another connection from my experience in Garfield when I spoke about being an honors student. I took honors history. And then I think it was my junior year, we got offered African history for the first time. And I was so excited. And so I signed up for African history, and I was immediately told I would be dropped from the honors program. I was told I had to take US history and that there was no option to swap it out for African history, even though African history is so much longer. So I protested, and I decided I wasn't going to take history at Garfield anymore. And I took African history. That was the only class I was going to take. And I took US history 1 and 2 at the same time at night school, just to prove that I could do it. Wow. So by senior year, I didn't have very many classes.
Right on. Good for you, though. I know. I feel like part of healing and the healing arts also is like learning our roots, learning so much of the stuff that is hidden from us about the contributions and struggles of Black people of Africa before colonization. We need that knowledge of self to heal as well.
The entertainment industry as a whole, it's a apprenticeship type of industry. So basically, everyone starts off as an assistant here. Whether you went to college, you didn't go to college or whatnot, and you basically learn how to do your boss's job until you eventually get the master of craft or the skill set, and your boss says, all right, you got the juice now, and you're now a creative exec, or you're now a coordinator, or you're now a vice president, or whatever. So as far as for me and my journey, it's taken that long, for 10 years really, for me to really understand and master this craft and build relationships, because Hollywood in itself is a relationship-based industry, and it's super small. So the goal is to get into the circle, and once you're in and you're known for doing the work and have those relationships and the reputation, you'll keep working with the same circle. The hard part is just getting into it. And now that I've gotten to this point where I've learned it, I've built these relationships, and now I'm starting to come into my own. The next goal for the decade is dominate. I'm just to be completely 100% honest, speak matter of factly. There's a lot of TV shows that are out there that are dope, a lot that aren't dope, and my goal is just to get a lot of dope content on the air, whether it's comedies, dramas, anime, you name it. I'm working on something and developing something in that space. So that'll be sort of the plan there. And again, it takes time to learn it, and you kind of have to be here on the ground to do so. But that's the energy that I'm on, and sort of my expectations for these next 10 years plus.
I think like one of the best pieces of advice I could give is that there's a book called The Artist Way by Julia Cameron. And she is a writer. And basically she writes novels, she writes screenplays, she writes plays, she writes movies. And she wrote a book called The Artist Way. She wrote another book called Walking in This World. She wrote another book called Finding Water. And The Artist Way is a number one recommendation. It's such a beautiful book. It's a 12-step program for clearing artist block. So if you're blocked as an artist, she gives you a 12-week program, a 12-step program on how to block all of that. Julia Cameron.
I'm very concerned around legacy work. And so by continuing the linkage back to our motherland, and not just for myself, but for the many people and the generations to come. Our children that you have not given birth to, we are giving this whole land an opportunity for them as well. So, as I mentioned before, I am the founder and the executive director of Adefua Cultural Education Workshop, and we are celebrating 36 years here in Seattle. We operate 4 programs annually, and so, we're a team of artists, we're a team of students, we're a team of supporters who love African arts and culture. And so, as I mentioned, first, get informed, right? And get engaged. So when we talk about Africa, we have this whole big continent here. You could fit the United States, the size of the United States, inside Africa at least 3 times. That's how large Africa is. So when someone says, oh yeah, I understand Africa, Africa is huge. And I encourage you to tap into it, because when we talk about legacy work, it's really about the linkage, right? It's the linkage of going back and contributing. Being happy and providing service is one of the most important things for me. So as we look at our future and our past, that's the work that I'm committed to. And so as I sit in the seat of this phase and preservation, I'm very happy to share this with you today. And I love connecting with my Garfield community. This has been such an honor. And I hope that I have said something that has made you open your eyes or say, aha, because you're recognizing who I am. Thank you.